How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Long Dream, the movie version. This is from the year 2000, and it is a made-for-TV Japanese horror movie. This is directed by Higuchinsky and stars Ken Arai, Kaei Asano, and Shima. Sorry if I mispronounced any of those names, but of course, Long Dream is based on a manga by Junji Ito, the famous horror comic artist from Japan. On the front, it reminds us he did Tomie and Uzumaki. Very, very good comics. And if you want to read the source material, in America, Long Dream is in this collection called Shiver, and I definitely would recommend checking out the comics. All of Ito's comics are really great. In this collection, you also get a Tomie story, you get the fashion model story, and of course, the hanging blimp story. I think there's like 9 and a bonus story in here. This is one of his better short story collections, and at the time of recording, it's super easy to find. Almost any Barnes & Noble should have it. I would definitely recommend checking out the comic. Anyway, the movie itself. Brief, non-spoilery plot synopsis. We open up with this patient, a girl who has a benign brain tumor, but is very afraid of death. And one day, or night rather, she screams and says that she saw death in her room, a Shinigami, if you will, and she's all freaked out, but the nurses say, no, that wasn't death, that was another patient, and she says, no human could possibly look like that, and they get her back down, and one of the doctors, a younger one, turns to the older doctor and says, I'm relatively new here, this girl's my first patient. The other patient that came into her room, who is he? And why was this girl so afraid of him? I don't know the story yet, can you tell me? So, a good sense of build-up and anticipation. Who is this other patient that got this girl so scared? And that's where we do a flashback, and the doctor tells his story about this mysterious patient that wandered into the hospital. He's an average Japanese young man, but he has long dreams. He said he first started noticing when his dreams were like 2 or 3 days long. He'd go to bed and he'd have a dream, and in the dream it felt like 2 or 3 days were passing, and then he'd wake up back in the real world. And that's kind of interesting, but it increases exponentially. Days in the dream become weeks in the dream, become months in the dream, and this had been going on for a month with him before he came to see a doctor, and by a month, he had spent a whole year in the dream world, and the doctor, of course, doesn't really believe him. He thinks it's either a story or maybe it's some psychological problem, but he studies him and he sees that there is a crazy spike. You know, he has seizures, his eyes move like rapid eye movement, and the little machine with the needles just going nuts. So something is happening here, and it increases exponentially. It gets bigger and bigger each time, and that wouldn't be so much of a problem if they weren't all predominantly nightmares. You know, he says he has a dream where he's at war. He has a dream where he's looking for a bathroom for 8 years. So yeah, there are some that are kind of funny, like, you know, he's studying for a test for years and years that will never come, you know? So weird, surreal dreams that take up years and years of his time. But on top of all that, with increasing exponentially, you're going to go into a dream and you're going to be there for like 10 years? That world is going to seem much more real to you than the waking world. This day, or if you can stay up, maybe 2 days of reality versus years in the dream, that's going to seem like this weird, surreal stop that isn't going to feel like reality anymore. It's going to feel like a break in your dream world. And he says, you know, you have yesterday, you go to sleep for a year, you wake up, you're not going to remember what happened a year ago super clearly. So even though it was yesterday for everyone else, he wakes up and goes, where am I? Oh yeah, I did go to the hospital. And yeah, having that sort of distance and having it where, you know, after years and years, reality just seems more like the dream. And that is a crazy, horrifying concept. And yeah, that really is the strength of Ito's story, is this really just messed up idea. And, you know, what can you even do for this guy? Yeah, I really do love this concept. And overall, this movie really adapts it pretty well. Like, I'm talking for most of the movie, it felt like Rosemary's Baby level of faithfulness. The most obvious addition is the main doctor that's looking after him. He had a fiance that died, and he'll have flashbacks to his fiance, and this will add to his motivation later on in the movie, but that's the most obvious new thing. That is for most of the movie. But this movie does kind of a weird thing where I thought, okay, you know, I just read the comic kind of recently, I'm like, we're getting to the end now, but then once you get to the end where the manga stops, it keeps going for a little bit. Like, the whole last act is completely new to the movie, and I thought that was an interesting thing. You know, when you get source material, comics, novels, video games, runtime versus movie runtime is always an issue, and they only had, this is only 58 minutes, it's a made-for-TV movie, so they didn't have as much of a problem, but it was still a little short, and the idea of just continuing, I thought that was kind of interesting. Just keep going, just keep telling the story. It's better than introducing something in the middle of the story and just completely wrecking it. And as someone who read and liked the comic, the idea of seeing what happens to these characters afterwards, it's pretty interesting. Now, me personally, if I was doing this, how I would have added more runtime would be, I would love to see more of the dreams. You know, if I was doing this, I would have shot several dream sequences and, you know, make it really surreal. And here, for something about dreams, you don't really get to see too much of the dreams, and I think that's probably a budgetary issue. But even in Ito's original manga, the dreams you really only see for like a couple panels, and it's just something I always felt was missing from the story. But it's a made-for-TV movie. To go out and build a whole set for a dream, yeah, probably was a little bit beyond what they could do, but that would be what I would love to see. But by doing the story in this way, they focus, instead of on the patient, the doctor becomes more the main character, and it becomes this kind of crazy plot, what the doctor does in response to the patient, which they hinted at the end of the original manga, but here we get to see how all of it plays out. Again, no major spoilers, but I did think it was interesting, although I'm not sure, you know, if it was the best, but I thought it was pretty cool, and it kept, you know, it kept the original manga faithful, you know, so if you don't like all this extra stuff, just pause it when the manga ends, and just, you can ignore the rest if you want to. But I did like the extra stuff, you know. But also, with this one, I do want to talk about cinematography and shot choice. The cinematography in this one's pretty cool. Personally, one thing I really like about Japanese horror is it does feel more real with their cinematography, because modern American films tend to really process and color correct everything to heck, to the point where it feels like a movie and it looks nice, but it loses that sense of reality. So I do like the Japanese style of cinematography. It really does feel grittier and realer. And also in this movie, we do get sections of found footage. It's by no means the whole thing, but there are little bits of footage, security cameras, filming the patients while they're doing tests and talking to them. And that does add to the sort of realism factor, although it's kind of odd they did the found footage realistic element with how crazy this movie goes, because this movie does go a little bit crazy. There are definitely slices of Dario Argento in here. There is bright colors, lots of like yellows and reds, and I do appreciate a nice colorful movie. And there is a fair bit of that. And also shot choice, you know. There's a shot where some doctors are talking on the stairwell, cameras lower, looking up at them, and the painting on the wall behind them is this golden painting of a giant brain, kind of abstract. But that's just a good little shot for a shot that's essentially just two people talking. You know, there's some good stuff like that. One of the shots I really like, you know, there's a nurse who's been knocked down in a hallway, and you see her from a distance, and the camera zooms in at her. I always love a quick zoom. That's really cool. And another shot that could have been kind of boring, two doctors talking in the office. It's shot from an up angle, kind of looking down like a camera might have been, but the floor is all red for some reason, which does give it this surreal element, you know, almost like the floor's covered in blood, but it's just the floor's painted red here. And yeah, there's lots of interesting shot choice, lots of moving camera, and I do really appreciate a movie with good, interesting shot choices in it. So yeah, a little slice of Argento, not as crazy as Argento goes. Maybe a little bit of House, not as crazy as House goes. But when you see, like, behind him, they're talking about the dreamer's story, and, like, clocks are floating behind his head, I'm like, okay, that's kind of a House shot. Or he's spinning around when he's starting to get out of it. And that does, again, make me wish that we saw more of Dream World. But one other thing I do have to talk about is the body horror element. And I said this when I was reviewing the original manga, is the concept was enough. We didn't really need the body horror, but at the end of the day, who's going to complain about some Junji Ito body horror? Great, crazy drawings. Now, again, like the most of this movie until they get to the stuff they made up, very faithful. Although, in live action, that may not necessarily work. The dreamer's body begins to adapt as he starts to sleep longer, and it makes him look kind of grotesque. And I won't describe everything, although if we look at the cover a little bit, but the thing with the first and the main transformation that you see, it's very similar to Ito's drawing, and it is a practical effect, which I do appreciate. I mean, it's the year 2000, so most things would be, but it does look a little cheesy. The head's a little too big, and it does kind of look like a monster costume. It's accurate, kind of cheesy, but, you know, again, part of me kind of likes the cheesiness. The big thing, though, is the eyes. The eyes were exaggerated. This is a guy who, you know, slept way too long, is kind of peering to, you know, keep himself awake. And I kind of wish it was more subdued and realistic. You know, make it, you know, not as crazy as Ito's drawings, because he's got kind of big ping pong ball eyes. They're not the actor's actual eyes, and the eyes are where all the emotion is. So maybe, you know, don't make his head as big, keep the actor's real eyes. But, you know, I can't really complain with a cheesy movie monster, because it is fun. But yeah, it is a little on the cheesier side. And, whatever. But that being said, and again, I'm going to try not to spoil too much, but you do get to see a second form of the Dreamer when he changes a little more. It's the famous shot where he's sleeping there at the end, and seeing a live action, completely comic accurate version of the Dreamer's final form, okay, that's pretty cool. And it's one of those things I'm like, I didn't know that would look as cool as it is in live action, but it really, it just played out really well, and I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's straight from the comics, that's pretty cool. So I did like, the first form we saw, I thought was cheesy. I liked it, but it was cheesy. The second form, okay, I like that one. But anyway, at the end of the day, Long Dream, I thought was a pretty good Ito adaptation. You know, the idea of we need more runtime, let's just continue the story. And we do have a very faithful, for the most part, opening, and it's just the last little bit where we do something new, and the new stuff is fine. But I do love how faithful this was, and yeah, it gets a little cheesy, but whatever. And the insanity, I do like. There's tons of color, tons of great shot choices. Again, I just kind of wished we pushed it a little farther, and we actually got to see more Dream World. But for what it is, I mean, granted, this is a 58-minute made-for-TV movie. I think they pulled it off pretty well. I do want to see more of Junji Ito stuff. This is the only movie I have right now other than some random Tomie movies from the middle. I really need to find the first Tomie movie, but hunting down foreign films is a little harder than it should be. But if I ever see any more of Ito stuff when I'm out digging through used movies, I'll definitely pick it up. And if you guys know of any other movie adaptations of Ito stuff that came out pretty well, definitely recommend that to me. I'm always trying to hunt for good movies. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll put a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Asian media playlist. I've also talked about the movie House. I referenced that in this review. You can see my review for there. Definitely would recommend that. And I also have a full review for the Shiver collection in there as well. So anyway, if you want to see more, Asian media playlist should pop up here. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.